Okay, think about this for a second. Globally, there are something like 37 million people practicing yoga.
Wow, 37 million. That's a huge number.
It really is. It shows it's definitely more than just some trend. So today on the deep dive, we're going to, well, dive into the history and how modern yoga evolved.
Yeah, not just the poses everyone sees, right?
Yeah, exactly. We want to trace how it went from its ancient roots in India to, all the different kinds we have now in studios, online, everywhere.
And we've got some interesting sources for this, an academic take, different guides to styles.
Right. The goal is really to understand how yoga adapted, who the key people were, and what forces kind of shaped it into what it is today for you, the listener.
It's fascinating, actually, because when yoga first really made its way west with Swami Vivekananda back in 1893.
At the world's parliament of religions.
That's the one. He didn't really lead with the physical stuff. He presented yoga mostly as a science of the mind.
A science of the mind, okay.
Yeah. His book, Raja Yoga, focused on meditation, mental discipline. And it really clicked with Western thinkers at the time.
So the physical side, the Hatha yoga poses.
Largely ignored, really, by both Indian elites and Westerners. They just didn't see it as that important then.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So for thousands of years in India, yoga has these deep, spiritual, mental roots. Then it comes west, and the first hook is all about the mind. It's almost strange, thinking about the yoga most people know now, that the physical part was initially sidelined.
It is, yeah.
Well, what changed? What made the physical sides suddenly become, well, central?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, the 1920s were a real turning point. You had two big things happening together.
Okay.
One was this growing wave of Indian nationalism as sort of reclaiming of heritage.
Right.
And the other was this increasing interest in Western ideas about physical fitness and, exercise culture.
Ah, okay. So those two forces kind of met.
Exactly. And that created this environment where people started looking at Hatha yoga differently. Figures like Sri Yogendra and Swami Kuvalayananda were really important here.
How so?
They set up yoga institutes, but crucially, they started doing scientific research. They wanted to actually show the health benefits of the physical practices.
Applying science to it. That's a big shift.
A huge shift, moving towards an evidence-based approach for the physical side. That was key.
So that scientific validation must have helped its acceptance, especially in the West later on. But who was the person who really sort of blended the old traditions with these newer ideas?
That really brings us to Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. He's often called the father of modern yoga.
Okay, I've heard that name. What was his big contribution?
Well, he was incredibly skilled. He took traditional Hatha yoga and started weaving in elements from Western gymnastics.
Gymnastics, really?
Yeah, specifically a system called primary gymnastics by a Danish guy, Niels Buch. It was all about rhythmic, flowing movements. Krishnamacharya saw how that could work with yoga postures, the alasanas, to make them more dynamic.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. So he's creating this fusion. Did any specific practices come out of that time that are still fundamental today?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the sun salutation Surya Namaskar.
Right. Almost everyone knows that one.
It popped up around the 1920s, introduced by Pawanrao Pantpratniti. And it's a perfect example. Blends Indian postures with Western-style flowing movement. Became a cornerstone. But Krishnamacharya's legacy, it also flows through his students. People like BKS Iyengar, K. Patabi Joys, TKV Desikachar.
Definitely familiar names, major figures.
Exactly. Each one took Krishnamacharya's teachings and kind of spun them into their own distinct styles. And those styles really defined what modern yoga became.
Right. So those iconic styles we see today really started to take shape then. How did they develop and get known?
So between roughly the 1930s and the 1970s, these styles really solidified. You had Iyengar Yoga BKS. Iyengar formalized it around 66.
Known for precision, right. That's
Yeah,
Rob.
exactly. Super focused on precise alignment in every pose. And he pioneered using props, blocks, straps to make poses accessible or to go deeper. Really innovative.
Okay.
Then there's Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. K. Patabi Joy set that structure up around 1948. That's much more athletic, vigorous.
The sequences linked by breath?
That's the one. Set sequences, always the same, flowing with the breath, the vinyasa. Very dynamic.
And Sivananda.
Sivananda Yoga, yeah. Swami Sivananda established that in 1959. It's more holistic, you could say.
How so?
It combines 12 core poses, specific breathing techniques, pranayama relaxation, but also things like a vegetarian diet. It's a whole lifestyle approach.
So already back then you had this emerging diversity. Different strokes for different folks, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah. catering to different needs and preferences.
And you mentioned earlier the 60s counterculture played a part in spreading these in the West.
Oh, definitely. The 1960s were, a time of huge cultural shifts. People were looking for alternative ways of thinking, spirituality, well-being. Yoga fit right in.
Like the Beatles going to India.
Exactly. Their trip to see Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in '68 was huge publicity. It made Eastern practices, including yoga, suddenly seem cool and accessible to the mainstream West.
So it goes from being kind of niche to having this much broader appeal. What else helped it become the big fitness and wellness thing we often see today?
Well, several things came together. In the 60s and 70s, immigration rules relaxed in places like the U.S., and international travel got easier.
So teachers can move around more easily.
Exactly. Teachers brought their knowledge, set up schools, and by the 70s, the word was getting out about the actual physical benefits: stress reduction, flexibility, strength.
So people start seeing it as, well, good exercise.
Yes, and that led to more dedicated yoga studios, proper teacher training programs starting up, and then you saw styles emerge that leaned into that fitness angle.
Like Bikram.
Bikram yoga. Yep, in the 70s. Famous for the heated rooms, the set sequence, the heat was supposed to help you detox and get more flexible.
And power yoga.
That came a bit later, in the 90s, really targeting that fitness crowd with faster, more aerobic style flows.
Which brings us more or less up to the 21st century. And it feels like yoga styles just keep multiplying. How has it kept changing recently?
It really has exploded in the 21st century, just incredible diversification. Now you see styles specifically focused on mental health or deeper spiritual aspects.
Like what?
Well, restorative yoga, which is all about deep relaxation, holding passive poses for a long time. Yin yoga, which targets the deeper connective tissues, not just muscles.
Okay.
And Kundalini yoga, which uses specific breath work, movements, chanting, really focused on energy.
And technology must play a role too.
Oh, massively. Online classes, apps. It's made yoga accessible to literally millions more people globally. That 37 million figure we started with, a lot of that growth is recent, fueled by this accessibility.
It's amazing how many types there are now. Can we just quickly touch on some of the newer, maybe more new styles people might hear about?
Sure. Hot yoga is still big. That includes Bikram, but also other styles like hot Vinyasa, all practiced in heat.
Right.
Then you've got aerial yoga.
Using the hammocks?
Yeah, using silk hammocks for support. Allows for different kinds of stretches, makes inversions easier for some.
It's fun.
It can be.
Yeah.
Then there's acro yoga that blends yoga with acrobatics, often done with a partner. Big focus on trust and connection.
Okay.
Mantra yoga focuses specifically on chanting and sound vibrations for meditation. And something really important is trauma-informed yoga. That adapts practices to be super safe and empowering for people who've experienced trauma. Prioritizes choice.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
It really is. Then, for accessibility, you have chair yoga for people with limited mobility. You've got HIIT yoga, high-intensity interval training, mixed with yoga.
Wow, really blending genres there.
Totally. And maybe more controversially, things like naked yoga, which aims to promote body acceptance.
Right. It really shows how adaptable yoga has become, doesn't it? Catering to almost every possible interest or need.
It's incredible adaptability, yes.
So thinking about this huge global spread, what's the wider cultural impact? It's clearly moved far beyond just being an Indian practice.
Oh, absolutely. Modern yoga is genuinely global now. It's a really interesting case of cultural exchange, syncretism, blending Indian heritage, mixing with Western ideas about the body, fitness, psychology.
Is there a way to categorize all these different modern forms?
Well, one useful way comes from the academic Elizabeth DeMichelis. Back in 2004, she proposed a typology.
Yeah.
She talked about modern psychosomatic yoga. I think Sivananda focused on mind, body, spirit integration. Then modern denominational yoga, often linked to specific neo-Hindu gurus or groups like ISK Khan, perhaps.
Right.
Then modern postural yoga, this is probably the biggest category, things like Iyengar and Ashtanga, where the main focus is the postures, the asanas, and maybe breath work.
That sounds like what most people encounter.
Very likely. And finally, modern meditational yoga, where the core is concentration techniques, like transcendental meditation.
That's a helpful way to think about the different intentions behind the styles. But, with this huge popularity, especially the postural stuff becoming mainstream, there's been pushback. right? Talk about commercialization, cultural appropriation.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Those are really significant and ongoing conversations. As yoga got more popular, especially in the West, and often stripped down to just the physical workout aspect.
Losing the roots.
Exactly. Valid questions arose about whether it was being appropriated, disconnected from its cultural and philosophical origins. Campaigns like Take Back Yoga by the Hindu American Foundation tried to highlight its Hindu heritage.
So the link between modern yoga and Hinduism is complicated.
It's complex and sometimes debated, absolutely. But regardless of those debates, you can't deny yoga's global impact.
No, clearly not.
I mean, the UN declared an International Day of Yoga in 2014. UNESCO recognized it as intangible cultural heritage in 2016. That's major global recognition.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, we've seen this incredible journey. Yoga starting in the West primarily as a mental discipline, then undergoing this huge shift towards the physical, driven by figures like Krishnamacharya and his students.
Right, leading to that first wave of distinct styles like Iyengar, Ashtanga, Sivananda.
Which then exploded globally, diversifying into this huge range of practices we see today for fitness, for mental health, for spiritual connection.
All adapting constantly. It's gone from niche to this worldwide phenomenon, though, as we said, not without complexities and ongoing discussions.
Absolutely. It really makes you think. As yoga keeps evolving and spreading, adapting to new cultures and needs, what does its future look like?
That's the big question, isn't it? And maybe for you listening, how can understanding this whole evolution, this rich, sometimes tangled history, inform how you approach yoga, whether you practice it or just encounter it in the world?